Welcome to the Catholic History Minute. Today, we're going to talk about the Protestant Reformation and the Munster Rebellion of 1533. Hope you enjoy. When I normally teach the Protestant Reformation, I often start with the story of the Munster Rebellion of 1533. Because the Munster Rebellion really perfectly encapsulates what the Reformation really was, right? The Reformation is poorly named because it wasn't a reform of anything. It was a revolution. And that revolution really culminated in the destruction of Western civilization, i.e. Christendom. And the Munster Rebellion of 1533 is close enough to the source to give a good example of the chaos that ensued after these ideas of the Protestant Reformation entered into the European thinking. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, so the Munster Rebellion comes out of the religion of Anabaptists. Anabaptistry gets its name from their idea that infant baptism wasn't valid, that you could only be baptized as an adult. Now, in many of the Protestant sects today, or denominations, you'll see this same ideology that permeates it. But at the time in 1533, this was still a fairly unique idea in the Protestant Reformation. The other name that the Anabaptists go by is Fifth Monarchy Men. Now, this idea of Fifth Monarchy Men goes back to the book of Daniel. So they believed that the prophecies in the book of Daniel, of the different nations or kingdoms that make up those prophecies, there were four that come before the fifth one, who's Christ. The four that came before were Assyria, Persia, Greece, and then Rome. And then the fifth kingdom is Christ. If you read the book of Daniel, it'll make more sense. There's multiple prophecies that talk about these kingdoms and whatnot. In any event, they saw that the Roman kingdom would not be completely destroyed until the Catholic Church, which obviously has its head in Rome, was completely destroyed. And then, only then, could the kingdom of Christ come into existence. And they believed that this kingdom of Christ that would come into existence would last for 1,000 years, their millennium, and that Jesus would reign over all of his saints here on earth, and then at the end of that millennium, he would come back and bring them all up into heaven. So, when the Fifth Monarchy Men said they wanted to destroy the Roman Church, what they really wanted to do was destroy anything that looked like the Roman Church. So that means the enemy of the Anabaptists wasn't just the Catholic Church, it was all Protestants that actually looked like the Catholic Church, which include Lutherans, because the Lutherans had Lutheran bishops at this point, multiple sects that had spun off of Luther's teachings. Anyone that had the Presbyterians, anyone that had any kind of priest or bishop, that had to be destroyed. In 1530, four men introduced Anabaptistry to the city of Munster. Those four men were Bernhard Rothman, Bernhard Knipperdolnik, Jan Mathiasen, and Jan Buckold, or also known as John of Leyden. Now, Knipperdolnik becomes the mayor in 1533 of the city of Munster, and he introduces Anabaptistry as basically the state religion of Munster, and believes now that they are bringing up this new millennium. The new millennium is now starting in Munster. But in order to do that, they have to destroy everything, like I said, that reminds them of the Roman Church, which means they have to kick the Lutheran bishop out. They have to destroy all the major churches. They go through and destroy all the statues, all the stained glass windows. And basically anyone in any type of leadership, religious leadership, was either executed or banished and kicked out of the city. So this new springtime, this new reign of Christ was actually a reign of terror, as we'll see. Within the first year, they introduced polygamy, mandating that women don't have any rights to decide who they marry, that men can marry as many women as they want. In fact, Knipperdolnik marries 16 women and beheads one of them in the street because she was mouthing off to him. So this, like I said, this was not a reign of Christ. This was a reign of terror. But it all comes back to this idea that they were, as individuals, as saints, living for Christ. Anything that they did was holy because they were saints of Christ. So there was no idea of objective wrong and objective evil, because if you were an Anabaptist, everything you did was objectively good and righteous. How does this end? In 1534, the local princes realize that they have a problem in Munster. Now, in Germany, at this time, many of the local princes and lords and leaders were in support of the Protestant Reformation. And the reason for this was because they saw it as an opportunity to get out from the yoke of Rome. They didn't like this idea that we have a pope in Rome who's telling them what the secular leaders what to do, or the bishops being able to tell the secular leaders what to do. They liked this idea of, well, as an individual, I can read the scriptures and I can interpret what they mean for myself. I don't need some theologian to tell me what they are. Which all comes back to Martin Luther. But like I said, they realized pretty quickly by 1534 that Munster was a disaster zone. You have all these horror stories coming out, women being butchered in the street, being raped in the streets, massive orgies taking over, entire buildings being destroyed. So the princes, they get their armies together and they surround the city. Now, the four men in control realize that they're about to lose control, so they do the only sensible thing and attempt to burn the entire city to the ground. Luckily, though, there was an attack in the middle of the night, and they took back the city from these lunatics and arrested most of the ringleaders. So the princes execute the leaders of this, of the Anabaptists. However, many of the Anabaptists who had flocked to Munster when they heard that it was an Anabaptist city were able to escape, and they went to England. And we'll see the results of that nightmare in a future video. But regardless, the ringleaders of the Munster disaster were executed, and their bodies were hung on the steeples of one of the major churches in Munster. And in fact, up until the 1930s, I don't know if they're still there today, but in the 1930s, the cages that held those bodies were actually still attached to the steeple as a reminder to the entire city of what had happened in 1533. So it's important to remember that this was Protestant against Protestant. This wasn't Catholics killing Protestants. These were Lutherans killing Anabaptists, right? So this idea that the Reformation was this bringing about, like I said, springtime in Christianity is actually ridiculous. It's completely contrary to the historical record. It was chaos. It was complete and total chaos, because when they attacked the true establishment, the true hierarchy that Christ had set up, then everybody becomes a hierarchy. And anybody can do whatever they want to do. Or the powerful can control the weak, as we saw what happened in Munster. So, like I said, it's important to remember that this was Protestant against Protestant. And it's also important to remember that this is the result of the revolution that was the Protestant Reformation. This is what you get. You get people justifying evil acts in the name of Christ, which, of course, our Lord prophesied. So I think that's just an important lesson that we can learn going forward. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with all your friends on social media. And we'll see you next time.